Welcome to Artek. Today I'll be walking you through how to use the Artek's Customizer graphics app for the Garmin core system. The Artek graphics customization app allows you to customize the names of different devices connected to a Garmin core system. Those could be lighting zones, tank sensors, switching outputs, ventilation fans, etc. So once you've downloaded the configuration files from the shared Google Drive folder, you can open up the application. These first couple of sentences go over how the graphics app editor works, what exactly it will configure, and just the steps along the way. It will also outline some requirements for the application, those being the compressed graphics file that you've downloaded from the shared Google Drive folder, and then if you're going to be using any custom icons for this application, how those custom icons need to be configured and saved. So you'll notice in this first input box that it's asking for the compressed graphics file that was downloaded from the shared Google Drive folder. We'll select Choose File, and then select the graphics app that was downloaded. Once that zip file has been selected and uploaded, we're going to move on to the labels and customization of the different buttons that are present within the application. We can skip this graphics template upload, and I will address it later in the video. So once we arrive to the homepage buttons, you'll see 4 different buttons that can be customized, and the customizations being labels and icons. So homepage buttons, you have your input box for text, you have a choose icon module here that lets you select icons from a pre-existing library, and for each button there is a reference pop-up box that will illustrate where in the Artek Garmin app those buttons will live. So for instance, you have button 1 that will be present on both the home page here and then also on the switching page here. So once you have decided which output you want button 1 to be and how you want it named, you can enter that name into the text input box. So for button 1, we will name it air compressor, and then select an icon from this library that best represents our text input. If you were not satisfied with an icon in that library or had a particular icon in mind, you can select that icon and upload it from your local computer. Once selected, it will bring up a upload dialog box where you can select the PNG file that meets requirements and specifications. After you've inputted a name and selected an icon for a button, you can move on to the next one. So button number 2 for homepage buttons. If you select this reference module, you will see that it lives here on the home page and here on the switching page. We can close this reference box and then go ahead and name button number 2. We'll name it slide out, choose an icon, and then continue on. The same can be done for buttons 3 and 4. If you are not using all output channels on the Connect 50, you can leave these buttons blank, and in doing so, they will not be edited for the graphics app. Once you've finished customizing the home buttons, you will move on to the plumbing page module. So for plumbing page buttons, it's the same general idea as the homepage buttons. You enter in a name that best corresponds to that output channel's device. So for button number 5, channel number 28, on the plumbing page, we'll name it water pump, and then select this reference box to see where in the Artek Garmin app that output and button name will live. You see here that it's present on the plumbing page and then also on the switching page. These plumbing page buttons should line up with your plumbing outputs. This way your plumbing devices are being represented appropriately on the app. So button number 6 operates the same way button number 5 does, where we can check this reference module, see where the button will be located, name the button, select the appropriate icon, and then continue. The next module you'll encounter is the switching page buttons module. In this module, there is the ability to customize 4 more buttons and channel outputs. This module only applies to systems that do not have a Cruise and Comfort AC installed. This is because the Cruise and Comfort AC system uses these output channels for DC distribution. So if your system did in fact have a Cruise and Comfort, you can toggle this switch on and you'll notice that the module will disappear. For this example, we'll leave the Cruise and Comfort off, and then we can go through and continue to label buttons. Same general idea as the previous input boxes and icon selections. So once you've finished customizing and labeling buttons and outputs, you would move on to the labeling of tanks. We'll notice here that we have new tank labels for 4 possible tanks. For tank 1, we can name it freshwater. For tank 2, gray water, and tank 3, LPG. If you were to only have 3 tanks or less than 4 tanks, any of these input text boxes that are left blank, they will just not affect the graphics file and it's customizing. Those labels will just not be there. If you move on to interior lights, it operates in a very similar fashion. You can label any of the interior lights in the application. So these will correspond to channels 1 through 4, which are designated for interior lights for the Connect 50 device and for the serve display. So for interior light 1, we can name it front. For interior light 2, rear, and interior light 3, kitchen. After naming interior lights, you can move on to name the auxiliary lights. So these labels correspond to channels 5 and 9, which can be configured to interior or exterior lights, and you would just name those accordingly. The next module you'll see is a exterior lights module that simply indicates that exterior lights cannot be edited, unfortunately. That is due to how these labels align with pre-existing graphics and indicators in the Artek app. So we'll scroll past that module, and then we arrive at ventilation fans, where we can label up to 2 ventilation fans. So once you're satisfied with how you've customized and labeled your buttons, fans, and outputs, you can save this graphics template file for later use. And by hitting Save Template, you'll be saving this template locally as a JSON file. This JSON file can be used for later customizations by scrolling to the top of the app and then by choosing that JSON file that we had saved and loading the template into the editor, and that will populate all of the customizations and labels that you had created in an earlier configuration. You can then select Submit Configuration, which will then prompt you with a download dialog box where you'll be saving a new graphics file that will be compressed into a zip file. By default, this file will be labeled Updated Graphics Configuration File with a date stamp, but can be changed to something more legible. And once saved locally, you can then upload your new graphics configuration file to the Garmin core system, and the changes and customizations that you've made in the application will take effect. Thanks for joining me today as we walked through the Artek graphics editor application for the Garmin core system. If you have any questions, please reach out to our staff. And as always, there are any pertinent links in the description below.